Welcome back to the Puck Bunker. I'm Rocco Zappia, joined as always by my co-host, the man who is the rumored Russian informant for the Hurricanes scouting staff, Darren Boyce. And today we are joined by special guest Nick Bass from the Developing Hurricanes podcast. You can follow them on Spotify and Apple, and also on Twitter at Canes Prospects. And they put out tons of great content, so give them a follow. Nick, thank you for joining us. How are you doing tonight?
Doing all right. Hopefully you two are doing well also.
Absolutely. Boyce had a little car trouble. He's actually trapped at his cottage right now, which is a pretty nice place to be trapped. But he's not recording from his usual location, but that's okay. They got the Wi-Fi set up in the woods for him, and we're good to go. Let's start off with the season that was for Carolina, and unfortunately for Canes fans, it was a similar story for them, losing to the Florida Panthers in the third round for the second time, and for the second time in the last couple of years. What are your thoughts on the season that was in Carolina? There was obviously a ton of, two really major moves mid-season, but how do you think the team fared? And are you kind of satisfied, or do you consider that past season a success?
I think going into the year, people were a little. I think they had their expectations tempered just because they moved Gensel and then you lose Shea and Pesci and a couple other guys, and you expect to take a step back, but obviously they really didn't. They had the whole Ehlers thing, which ended up going spectacularly, as we all saw. I mean, I personally enjoyed ending up with Logan Stankoven, even though people might be worried about his size. He's one of the people that you just watch whenever he plays, and he's just enjoyable. He's somebody that you always look forward to watching just because of the way he plays, even as a smaller guy. And I think it went better than a lot of people thought because, in other years where they've had all this talent, they haven't made it to the conference finals. And a year where they were supposed to take a step back, made a big swing, had to correct the big swing, and they ended up still going to the conference finals and finally winning a game. I think that was probably a lot better than what people expected this year to turn out to be. But again, I think people just kind of overlook Carolina as a whole just because they just expect a first, second round exit, but a really strong regular season team at this point.
I'll give you a follow up there, and then I'll turn over to Boyce. I'm sure he's itching for a pretty specific topic here. But you mentioned Logan Stankoven. Now you went Marty Necas, Mikko Rantanen. He couldn't get signed, even though he ended up signing for the same damn thing he offered him anyways later on. Turn that into Stankoven and some other pieces. What were your thoughts on that whole situation? And like, did that stem from the fact that they just couldn't, or maybe they felt like they weren't going to be able to get Necas done at a reasonable deal that they were happy with, and one thing led to another, and all of a sudden you're looking at kind of acquiring assets where you originally kind of were giving guys up for the singular piece there in Rantanen.
I think it's kind of been well known, at least to Canes fans, that Necas probably wasn't going to sign long term, or the Canes weren't going to give him the money that he was looking for long term, just because he can be a great player. It didn't look like it was ever going to happen in Carolina. Maybe it still happens in Colorado, but I didn't. I don't think many Canes fans kind of saw it happening that way, and then somehow turning him and Jack Drury into Mikko Rantanen, I thought was really good work because you had the opportunity to sign Mikko Rantanen, who was like your star. He could have been your superstar, and then obviously it didn't work out. But I think that whole thing kind of got blown out of proportion, even though it definitely deserved it. And but it didn't seem like he would want to sign here, and maybe that was a backtrack of what he said, but it seemed like he just got caught off guard, and then obviously the move happened, and I was just happy to see it over with because it was getting to a point of just annoyance.
Is there getting to be any angst maybe amongst the fan base that you guys have this, at least maybe from the outsider's opinion, there's I think you guys have a really solid contending team, but you're not quite getting over the hump. Is there any angst there, or is it, as you were saying, it's kind of a little more positivity because they were a younger team this year?
I would lean toward the positivity aspect just because, again, it was a really young team, and the moves they made going forward. I mean, Nikolai Ehlers isn't the superstar level that a guy like Mikko Rantanen is, but you ended up with, he's still a first line forward. You ended up still getting a top six winger and Logan Stankoven locked up long term for a crazy good numbers. So I think overall going forward, it's probably a lot more optimism and you're not too worried about it. But I can understand why people would look at it like you traded Mikko Rantanen and you got a younger guy who might not be an effective NHL guy because of his size or something like that. So I do understand it. I think it's just Canes fans are a lot more positive than people see, even though I feel as if they see it all the time.
This isn't Leafland, Rocco.
You know what? It's nice. We've done now we're well past. This is maybe the 9th or 10th team specific kind of tour around the league that we're doing. And one thing that we've noticed is that most fan bases are extremely down on their franchises, regardless of their level of success, other than Panthers fans. But so it's nice to hear that Hurricanes fans are actually appreciative of the fact that their team goes to at least the final 8 pretty much every year.
Yeah, because I mean, there's 24 other teams in the league that can't say they did it. So 24, something like that.
Well, yeah,
I can't do math.
So
that's okay. It's late.
So just to follow up on that they have lost in the conference finals a couple years in a row. In your opinion, what do they need to do to kind of make it over that hump and make a Stanley Cup final here?
Consistent scoring was always a big one. I know people will point out goaltending, but I don't really think that was really the issue because I think Frederik Andersen's been a good goalie for a period of time. I think they needed not a 40-year-old on their top pairing playing 25 minutes a night, and I think they needed Dmitry Orlov to not do what he did over the course of those 5 games. But I mean, you also had Scott Morrow playing his first professional playoff hockey games, or at least NHL hockey playoff games, and then you had Alexander Nikishin playing his genuine first NHL games in the late second round in the Eastern Conference Final, and there was always going to be somewhat of a transitional period that it's very rough to see him get thrown into that. And he wasn't even horrible; he was okay. Just again, Dmitry Orlov had one of the I don't even want to. It was just not great. But if that doesn't happen, then maybe you get some more consistent scoring. I think it might turn out a little bit different. But I think the Panthers are also just destined for it. So
there's that one guy on every team, Rocco. There's always that one guy.
Oh, there's always one guy that takes the brunt of the fans. But you know what? If you're getting paid millions of dollars and you're bad, then you deserve to get called out by the fans. That's just kind of how it goes. Now, to your point, consistent scoring. One other issue that's maybe a not uncommon opinion is that Carolina may not have that singular star franchise player that can win against a Barkov or can win against a McKinnon or a Crosby or a McDavid at some point. He is going to win a cup, so I'll put him on that list. But does Carolina have a true franchise player that can say this is the guy that can be the best player on our team and the best player in the league on a 4-round run? And if not, do we think, because what we all know, they have a ton of depth in their organization already and in their prospect pool. If they don't have that guy, do you feel that they have enough team depth to get it done almost, I want to say maybe almost in the St. Louis model, where you're doing it with 4 really solid lines and 3 really solid D pairs?
I think they're closer to the St. Louis model than having a guy that can just go out. I think Sebastian Aho has had flashes of dominant stretches in the playoffs. I think there's been that, and then you have Jacob Slavin, who I don't think you could ever call a franchise player, but what he does defensively offsets a lot of what happens otherwise. I would say St. Louis model definitely, because you're going to your third or fourth line and you're still seeing, probably a guy, you're probably seeing a Jackson Blake, you're probably seeing a Taylor Hall, you're probably seeing a lot of these higher end players and more depth roles just because of the talent they have loaded up front. And then even going to the fourth line, you're still going to have, these two-way guys and a lot more physical guys than the people in your top six. So I would say closer to the St. Louis model where they have a lot more depth and they're hoping the depth scoring can push them further than just having one guy that can do it all.
Yeah, no, and that's fair. Boyce, sorry, do you have a follow-up there?
No, I actually kind of wanted to move in, kind of use the depth model and kind of move on to the kind of the draft model or the draft class that you guys seem to be, I guess, or draft strategy, I guess you guys seem to be utilizing. You guys have made 5 second-round picks the last 2 years. It seems you're going quantity over well, maybe I'm not going to say quality, but you're definitely doing a quantity. You want to try and get as many kicks of the can as possible. And it's kind of Russian centric, a lot of your draft picks.
Kind of.
Kind of.
19. I'm gonna drop this now. 19 in the last 4 years. 19 out of 34 picks have been Russian. 17 in Russian leagues. There's a goalie in a Belarusian team and Ryabkin, who came over to Muskegon last year, being the exceptions there. But 19 of 34 draft picks in the last 4 years were Russian. And like Boyce said, a lot of it is trading down to find value. Do you even have scouts, or are we just letting computers model the most effective and efficient?
I am their scout. They're looking at me.
Darren is the computer model for Carolina.
I will say they do have a genuine scout that stays in Russia the majority of the year who's done really good work. He's an extremely good dude. And they've put a lot of faith into him over the past couple of years. So, I mean, yeah, they've taken a ton of guys from Russia, and I think a lot of it still comes from teams being a little bit nervous to take Russian players, even though I still think that's completely overblown at this point. We've seen college guys give more issues recently than Russian guys. So that's my opinion on it. And then, I mean, even The Athletic had a piece where they were interviewing executives and scouts, and they had a GM or an executive say they would take this player who was Russian, but they're worried about when he would come over. If he wasn't Russian, he'd probably get taken higher. So I think they're still getting a lot of value just off guys falling. Like you could even say like Semyon Frolov this year probably could have been a first round pick. Kurbin Limitov probably could have been a lot higher than a third round pick. There's a lot of guys. And I mean, last year, Nikita Artemonov, you obviously can't project him to have a top 5 U20 KHL season scoring wise. But at that same point, he's a guy that probably should have gone higher than where he was. So I think it's just GMs being a little bit nervous. And the Canes obviously have a guy out there who is able to watch all these players and talk to these players. So I think it's a little bit easier for them to just go, hey, we really value this player. And obviously these teams don't see it. So we can move back, get an extra pick or something like that. And we'll take the guy that we want there.
Just want to point out that Frolov was my number 1 goalie on the board this year. And we had Limitov in the first round. So we really liked your draft. So.
We had Orlov as our top goalie. I think we had Limitov 32nd overall. We had Roman Bausov ranked at 40th overall.
Yeah, he was another really fun one
on our list. So we are obviously huge fans. We put out an episode back in February that people are still watching, the top 5 Russian prospects, and you guys took pretty much all of them. So it's pretty much just a Carolina Hurricanes draft preview episode that we ended up doing. Now, what do we think? Do we think these picks are going to start panning out? Because now they've been really focused on this. I mean, 5 years ago they took two Russian guys. They had a bunch of picks that year. They took 2 Russian, but the last 4 years they've really been honing in on it. But now it's to the point that, you said the GMs, some of their worries as well, when are they going to come over? It could be 4 or 5 years. Well, now it is 4 or 5 years from that first batch. Do we think it's going to be not too long here before we start seeing this strategy pay some pretty big dividends for them?
I think at least next year, immediate returns, you're going to see Alexander Nikishin be one of their most important defenders because he's going to dictate a lot of what happens on the back line. Like if he develops the way, or if he plays the way like he has the past couple of years for SKA, he's going to be one of their better defensemen out the gate. And, a guy like Nikita Artemonov in like a year or two can come in and probably be, as a 21, 22-year-old, he can probably be a top 9, borderline top 6 forward. I think it's fine if they take longer to develop in Russia, because if they're staying in Russia, they're playing in top professional leagues, whether that be the VHL or the KHL. So it's easier for them to get that good experience comparatively to, like, I mean, they brought over Ruslan Hajayev, who probably played a lot more games than he should have this past year. And he hadn't played professional hockey. He had one VHL game in his draft plus one, and he was all MHL, which is a U20. So going there to playing professionally is a big jump. So I'm perfectly fine with them taking some time. And I mean, just looking at the past draft, Nikita Armonov had a top 5 U20 KHL scoring season. Timur Cole was named the best defenseman in the MHL final, and while averaging somewhere like 24-25 minutes a night, and he was playing KHL minutes somewhat consistently over his draft year plus one. There's a lot of guys that definitely showed a lot more promise. And I mean, Andrei Krutov just had a really, really good year in the Torpedo system as a 7th round pick. And it still, I think the immediate return aspect is probably not going to happen, just because it's one of those things where I think they value having development time somewhere else rather than doing it in North America. But I think at least this year you're going to get Nikishin, and within a year or two, you're probably going to get Artemonov. That'll give you immediate top 4 or top 6 returns.
So just to follow up here, and you were talking about the scout that they had, had there. Is there confidence in the organization they can get the guys that they want to come over? Like, is that part of it here? Are they pretty comfortable that they'll get them eventually?
I would say so. Yeah, I got no inside information, but I would definitely say, because having him there, he's able to talk to agents and he's able to talk to the players and he's able to do all that. So I think they're a lot more comfortable with it than some other teams. Definitely.
That's interesting. I've heard some scouts don't like it if they stay in Russia for a few years, Rocco. I don't know if I agree with that one, but
I look, I tend to agree with, look, you get 50 contracts that you can use. You only got guys that you draft out of North America or any other league for a certain amount of years. You have them in Russia. You can keep them there till they're wherever, and they don't cost you any assets. So I have a lot of time for that kind of, let's call it efficiency shopping that Carolina has become extremely good at. Now, moving off the Russians, one guy that you guys took last year that I was personally a very big fan of, I had ranked somewhere between 18 and 24. Anyways, he was a first rounder for me, was Dominik Badinka. What are their thoughts on him and the expectations of him? How did he progress this season? I see that he came over and he played a couple games in the American League to end the season. Is he going to be North America full time next year? And do we think he's going to get a lot of opportunity to grow in the American League, and they're going to kind of let him simmer until he's really ready to come up?
Yeah, so he will be fully North America this year. Malmo, I don't know if it was like a termination or something like that, but he does not have a contract with Malmo anymore. It is just with the Hurricanes. So he'll be playing for Chicago this upcoming year, and he'll probably be used really. He'll probably be one of their, I want to say top 4, but they also have Charles Alexis Legault, who played extremely well, and they also have Joel Nyström, who will make his first North American season, who is a little bit older of a guy for Chicago. But I think it's kind of, it stinks when I have to talk about a prospect in a somewhat negative light, because I never like doing it, but it was definitely a down year for Badinka, who I think people, or at least myself, was probably expecting a little bit more than just, a bottom 6 or a bottom pairing role where he was getting 10-12 minutes a night. And I think the defense held up though over time. I think the reason why he stayed in the SHL as a 19-year old is because his defense is really solid for where he is. I think the AHL is probably going to be better for him because it might suit his play style a little bit more. If he can just get a little bit smarter in and around the puck, I think he could probably keep going. But I still would say he's a couple years out. But long term, I still like his potential to be maybe a top 4 guy. But he's just there's a few things he's got to work on and show me a little bit more this upcoming year.
Yeah, it was the details there, but the tools there are so nice, right? He 6'3", he can really skate it. When he has time with the puck, he moves it quite well. So interesting guy with a lot of tools, but very, very on brand for Carolina in terms of the type of guy that they're willing to pick, right? guys with a lot of tools that they don't mind taking a couple of years. Now we've gone over the Russians, and Badinka was your guys' top pick last year. Who are some of the other top players, or maybe some guys that maybe the mainstream fan may not really know about, that every team has their guy that only the true fans know is going to be a player one day. Who are maybe the guys like that for Carolina, and where do you guys feel your strengths and weaknesses are in terms of your prospect pool?
So I'm gonna bang the drum for two guys I mentioned earlier in Timur Cole and Andrei Krutov. Timur Cole was genuinely outstanding in the MHL playoffs. He was really solid in the KHL over the course of his time there, and there's so much to like about his game. He's 6'4". He plays a really good brand of hockey for that style of defenseman. When Darren York and Eric Tulsky are talking about, with defensemen specifically, they want guys that can take away time and space. Timur Cole is very effective at doing that. He is such a good guy to just get when a guy is coming into the zone. He is very effective at meeting them and making sure that they do not know what to do, what to think. He's very good at that. His offensive potential I still like, because he helped power play the second unit for the MHL team in for their playoff run, and he looked pretty good doing it. He has a really good shot, and I like his playmaking ability. So I think there's a lot to like with the player there, and it's obviously a 6'4" defenseman. They don't grow on trees, in my opinion, but I think over the past year it's been proven that that's wrong. And then Andrei Krutov was a 7th round pick last year who I honestly didn't really know what to expect. Everything I kind of read and seen was that he had insane hands, but the rest of his game was very individualistic. And going into this year, I didn't really think much of him going into it. And then he steps into professional hockey in the VHL, has a really solid season, and showed that he can be a lot more than just a one-dimensional player with just really sick hands that might not be able to do a lot of other things. But he showed that he has a really good shot. He's able to do what he needs to do with the puck. And I mean, he made his KHL debut and he immediately scored multiple goals at the KHL level. So I definitely think as a 7th round pick, Andrei Krutov could definitely be a guy in the next, maybe year or two that people are talking about in a lot higher of a light. And I think that's really good because, again, he's a 7th round pick, and Timur Cole was, I think, a 6th. So two guys in the past year or two that they've taken really, really deep that have, at least to me, the guy who watches a ton of KHL, VHL, and MHL hockey, has turned out to be a lot better than expected so far.
The Hurricanes fan has become a VHL, KHL fan. Big fan of that.
He has no choice. If he wants to watch his guys, that's where they all play.
I've been learning Russian for the past 2 years, so.
So I guess the question, follow up on that with the prospect pool, like what's kind of the position of strength with the prospect pool? Is there something they're missing? Is there something they kind of need to address maybe with future picks?
I would say strength is defense, because they at least left-handed defensemen, they have so many guys. Like, you had all the guys that we've talked about already, Limitov, Cole. Then they have Shakrin Suryatsky. They have Noel Franzen, Simon Forsmark. They just have a ton of depth there. And I think, even on the right side, you still have, Charles Alexis Legault, you have Dominik Badinka, you have Yoel Nystrom, you have and Roman Bausov. You have a ton, and I truly mean a ton of guys. Weaknesses, there's two that stand out to me. I think goalie is still bad, even though Frolov definitely helps a lot because he immediately becomes your top guy. But Ruslan Hajayev has good potential in my opinion, but he did not show a ton of that this year, and that's probably because he was rushed into playing a lot of professional hockey when he probably shouldn't have out the gate. And then after him, you have Igor Velmakin, who is 22 and splitting time between the KHL and now is backing up Zach Foucault and some other guys for Dynamo Minsk. And then Jacob Vondras exists and Nikita Kwap exists. Everybody remembers Nikita Kwap from Germany's World Junior Games, where he was just absolutely unbelievable. But I still think that's weak. And then center, because I think their only true center besides maybe Justin Robida, who seems like more of a winger at the NHL level, is Charlie Serrato, who they just took. You could argue Ryabkin, and I wouldn't be against that at all, because I think Ryabkin could stick as a center, but I think long term he might just be better suited as a wing. So I'd say center and goalie are probably the two that could still use some work going forward.
You guys had an extremely busy off season. There was not a lot of sitting on the hands in Carolina this year after, well, look, hey, we laugh, but there's been 5 straight years where it's round 2 or round 3, right? So to me, that's a situation where it's kind of shit or get off the pot here. And it looks like they shit in the best possible way with a pile of high-end off-season moves. K'Andre Miller, Nick Ehlers, they re-sign Blake and Stankoven to long-term, extremely team-friendly deals here. What are the thoughts on? I mean, those are the big moves here. There's obviously some other minor additions here, but those are the big ones there that really kind of made headlines across the league, not just in Carolina. What are we expecting out of K'Andre Miller? I mean, I know he kind of has there's 2 versions of him. Nick Ehlers, I think, is you know what you're getting a little bit more. But yeah, give us your thoughts on those moves and how we think they might fit into Rod Brind'Amour's team.
Immediately, first thing, Logan Stankoven's agent should be locked up in a prison somewhere. 8 years at the money that he signed at for a guy that looked really, really good in the playoffs. I mean, hey man, I'm not complaining as a Canes fan, but that seems a little ridiculous to commit to it. And again, I'm not complaining. I think the money for Jackson Blake is fine, because even if he turns out to maybe just be a third line guy long term, that's still not bad for a third line guy in a very much so rising cap environment. I'm going to save Miller for last because I have a good amount of thoughts on him, but I think Nikolai Ehlers is a really good player. I think he fits what the Canes are trying to do more of, which is just get out with speed and move in transition more than just the dump and chase, which is something they started moving toward a lot more this year. They started taking the puck in controlled a lot more and letting their offensive guys have a lot more freedom with the puck and freedom in the offensive system, instead of just getting it to center ice, dumping it in, telling guys just to skate after it. They're letting them take it in and try and find open players. And I think that's a lot better. And I think Nikolai Ehlers fits that really well. He'll probably be on their first line with Aho and Jarvis, I'd bet. He'll probably be on their first power play. And I think it's a guy that they had chased after for a while, and they finally got him. And I think he'll probably work out. K'Andre Miller. Now, again, York and Tulsky have spoken at long lengths about wanting guys that take away time and space. And I think K'Andre Miller is very effective in that way, because he skates really well and he's gigantic. And I think he's going to fit what the Canes defense likes to do a lot more than what he was in New York. And obviously New York has a great track record of developing their players, their younger guys. So I think Miller is going to have a lot more freedom in Tim Gleason's defense. And I think he's going to get a lot of help with Tim Gleason being able to coach him up in that regard, because, even if he plays on the right-hand side next to Slavin, he is still going to be just out there. He's going to just be a physical presence. He's going to be able to move it. Like, he's going to be able to have a lot of freedom with it, because if he is paired with Slavin, he's going to have somebody to watch his back a lot of the time defensively. And I think letting Miller have a lot more freedom in his system, letting him use his strengths in his skating, in his just getting away, like having him jump up a lot more in transition in the offense, I think that's going to allow him to become a much better player. And I think 8 by 7.5 is aggressive for sure. But I also think, again, for a guy that could be a lot better in your system and is still relatively young by NHL standards, I think it's fine. I'm very interested to see how he meshes, but I think it could be a lot better than what it was in New York.
So it's a follow-up here. How much of an upgrade do you think Miller is over, you're speaking of a guy like Orlov or or Brent Burns, I guess. Yeah. So like how big of an upgrade do you think him and Nikishin are over those two?
Oh my goodness. A big to say the least, because Orlov, he's an interesting skater in his own right, and Brent Burns is 40 years old, so you get Keandre Miller, who is a great skater, and Alexander Nikishin, who might not be a great skater in terms of like just his ability to like get up to top speed, but he's a very powerful skater. So I think getting two guys that have the ability to move a lot more effectively than 40-year-old and 34, 35, 36-year-old is a much better thing. And having the ability to inject two young guys that can play in your top four for two older guys is a very, very good thing for Carolina to get into.
Go ahead, Boyce.
No, it's all right. So I was going to go to the other, portion of this. Again, you guys, if we kind of do the trade-off here, you guys obviously lost, Marty Necas here, but you were kind of replaced him with Ehlers and Stankoven. So are you happy with that trade-off, or do you think Ehlers might fit a little bit better than Necas did per se?
Nothing but respect to Martin Necas, because I think again can be a really sick offensive player. He was never going to fit in the Canes system unless he made drastic changes to the way he played. And I think going to a team like Colorado, or maybe somewhere else if he doesn't sign there, is definitely going to be better for him, because you're going to be able to pair Necas with a guy like McKinnon and a guy maybe like Lehkonen. I don't know who his most common partner was on that line, but pairing him with the people that can match his speed and match his just ability with the puck is definitely going to be better for him. I think, in complete honesty, this is one of those times where I could probably use win-win kind of effectively. For the Canes, you get Ehlers and Stankoven, and technically Rantanen, but that doesn't really count anymore. And you got rid of a guy who probably wasn't going to sign with you, didn't really fit your system the way you wanted him to, and you still got incredible value for him. And now he gets to go and play with, a top 5 NHL player in the league. So I think it all works out for everybody, in my opinion.
One of the biggest gripes, and I would say this has been probably our criticism of Carolina, is that they're not big enough and they're not tough enough when the chips are down and push comes to shove. Have they done enough to address this, or is this still a problem for them? Or do you even feel like it is a problem? I guess I shouldn't assume that it is a problem in the minds of Hurricanes fans. But you see them have so much success in the regular season and get to round 2 or 3, and then they just don't have it to kind of withstand the bullying of a team like Florida. Do we still think that this is a concern for them, or is this something that they're actively addressing, or is this something that they think that they can win their own way?
I think it's yes and no. I think yes, they did try to address it, because I think Alexander Nikishin and Keandre Miller being 6'4" and 6 I think Miller's 6'5". I think doing that and replacing, even though Burns and Orlov isn't the biggest, but those two were not physical. Alexander Nikishin is physical. We all know that. Keandre Miller has shown I think I had Matt have we were at development camp, and he pulled up a stat like a day or two after the Burns left and Miller got traded here, and like Miller had in 1 year had more hits than Brent Burns had in like 3 or something like that. It was some ridiculous stat, but I think those two over Burns and Orlov immediately gets a lot more physicality on your blue line. And I think, yes, on the one hand, when you see, Jackson Blake and you see Logan Stankoven and some of their other guys that are a little bit smaller, I think there is a genuine, like, hey, this could maybe be an issue. But I also think Logan Stankoven plays a lot bigger than what he is. Like he says he's 5'9" on paper, 5'8" maybe, but he doesn't play like he's that size. He's going into board battles, he's winning them, and Jackson Blake is the same way. That was one of the biggest things that a lot of journalists, and myself included, kind of went in and were like really shocked that Blake had just such a willingness to go into the dirty areas in the boards, and he somehow, some way, 5'10" Jackson Blake is coming out with that puck, and that's just the player he is. So, and he's not the most physical. Stankoven isn't the most physical. The roster itself isn't the most physical. Andrei Svechnikov can throw a hit from now and again. Jordan Stahl can, and players like that. Like, none of their skill guys are overtly physical, but I think a mix of, they can play a different brand of hockey that might have more success. Combine that with the fact that, they have guys that are at this point, they're tired of losing in that round. So you would hope at that point, the mental of like, hey, we're going to get hit. It's going to be ugly. We just have to get used to it. I would hope at this point it gets to that point. So I think, yeah, maybe, but I also don't. I think a lot of Canes fans don't see it that way, even though there is definitely a lot of outliers there.
Just looking at the way they draft, aside from the Russian factor, they don't seem to be too worried about their forwards being smaller, but their D, they like the D, as you just said, they have a lot of bigger D.
Yeah.
They drafted over the last couple of years. And you think that is that kind of their strategy then? If they're going to have a smaller unit up front, they want to kind of, that's, why Keandre Miller is a good fit for them. They want that big hulking D that's just going to be a menace to play against. Is that kind of what they're going for?
I think it's a nice coincidence because some of the guys they've drafted, like Ivan Ryabkin, he's 5'11", but I'm going to put big old quotation marks around 5'11" because he's thick and he likes to hunt for hits. So I think yes, but also like Ryabkin doesn't really play like he doesn't play like he's under 6 foot. Justin Poirier is like my prime example because he's 5'8", 5'9", but when you watch him play, he is out there just trying to manhandle dudes. And I think it's just a mentality and a play style thing where they kind of have guys that, they might be smaller. And this year, at least, Viggo Nordlund is a prime example of he's smaller. He's not physical at all. So it's kind of like they want to have a balance. They want to have some guys, they're going to take some guys that might be smaller, but they have the play style to just not play like that. But then you're also going to have guys like Viggo Nordlund and Felix Unger-Sorum who are small, who aren't physical and that have that, but they also have guys on the back end that can't help out.
It's almost like they found another market inefficiency there where it's just, these smaller guys that fall a little bit that they can find value with, even though most of them play a harder style anyway.
Yeah, I don't think that's wrong.
I think it's been pretty clear in terms of their drafting strategy that one of the big things for Tulsky is he certainly runs his draft very businesslike, and it's very asset management oriented, and it's very much about finding market inefficiencies and exploiting them. You have the head coach Rod Brind'Amour, who's from one of the more rough and tumble eras in NHL history when he played, and someone who's known for his brute strength, I'll call it. So what is the dynamic like between those two guys? And do we think that do they complement each other well? Is that the right mix of experience, old school mentality, and new age thinking that teams need? Or do we think that maybe might be too many competing ideas at some point down the road?
Whenever they were working on trading for Keandre Miller, they had the social media team worked on a video where they had behind the scenes and kind of showed the process of them working on trying to trade for Miller. And it was Brind'Amour and their pro scouts and Tulsky all just in the very same vein of, hey, this guy could be really, really good. And they're all on the same page. And that's kind of the thing is that Tulsky might have an idea and bring something up, but he will always go to Brind'Amour and ask his opinion on it and see what he says. Obviously, there's a ton of other factors at play. If they want a prospect, they're got to go through the amateur scouts. If they're looking at an NHL guy, they got to go through pro scouts. But that is one of the things that the organization also values is just they want to have everybody on the same page and they want to have everybody knowing what's going on. So if they're looking at guys, they want to have everybody being like, okay, this is what I think. And if they're looking at pro guys, they're going to have their pro scouts and they're going to ask Brind'Amour like, hey, what do you think? This is something that might happen, or this is something we're looking at. They're all going to be on the same page. And I think that's really important I think it's actually really cool because I don't really know if that happens a lot of other places where the front office and the coach, the GM and the coach are very much so synergized and like on the same page and at least talking with every single idea. So I think that's actually, I personally think it's really good. I think it's helpful for the organization in terms of what they want to do. So I personally like it. I don't really see it as that much of an issue.
Just in general with Brind'Amour, maybe I'll use your opinion on this. Thought on him, with the fan base. Are they happy with him? And I know, again, I'm going to go after the Toronto media here again. But out of those national media types, they kind of want, I don't know if they want Brind'Amour to leave there or something, but they always kind of hint that, oh, he might be out of there or someone doesn't want him there anymore. Is his job safe? And, what's the kind of the perception of Brind'Amour in Carolina?
I don't think Tom Dundon or Tulsky in that regard would fire Brind'Amour unless something extremely drastic happens. He has the respect of everybody in the organization. He has the respect of a lot of fans. He's taken the team from 2019 where they were, which was just mid, which was awful to watch as a fan, but going now to becoming a team that can go to the playoffs every single year, have a strong regular season almost every single year, and they haven't won the big one, and obviously that is an issue. And I think they've kind of realized that this is something they need to work on because his system has changed a good amount from when he took over, where it was a lot more dump and chase hockey, to at least over the last year they've kind of realized they need to change or it's just not going to work. And this was the first year you kind of, at least as fans, you kind of saw the change of a lot more creativity and not just straight dump and chase hockey, which I know that that's been the big thing that the Hurricanes brand of hockey, but they've slowly been working on changing it and making it something a little bit better and a lot easier for everybody to play. And yes, I truly think media wants him to leave because they respect him as a coach. He's done an incredible job. So I think they're going to keep attacking the Tom Dundon is cheap narrative until eventually he leaves. But I think people also forget that Brind'Amour did an interview when he first started coaching and said, hey, if I'm not coaching the Hurricanes, I'm coaching my kids and then I'm done. He does this job because he wants to, but he doesn't want to move. His whole life is in North Carolina. A lot, like, obviously Skyler is now in the organization. I'll let you take that one, but Brooks is still a young guy, and a lot of, like, his whole family is here. I think if something drastic were to happen, or I think more likely he retires from coaching before he ever gets let go or goes somewhere else. I think Brind'Amour is Carolina until the day that he decides hockey's not for him anymore.
I swear to God, Rocco, I'm going to the basketball reference again. This is the Toronto Raptors all over again. Because they want the coach to leave, they want the GM to leave. As they have a good coach. So all the big centers don't want him there. So you've heard it here first. The Toronto media is creating stories.
That would not be the first time nor the last. I'm pretty sure I've heard from good sources that every free agent in the last 50 years was going to sign in Toronto. So it wouldn't be the first time Toronto media.
Didn't they all? I thought they all signed there.
Yeah. Wayne Gretzky's coming out of retirement next year to play for the fucking Leafs. In your opinion, Nick, can we grade Carolina's offseason as a success? Did they do enough to make you feel like, A, the team is better than they were last year, but B, they can get past the big bad Florida Panthers?
I think this offseason was a success, yeah. I think bringing in Ehlers, bringing in Miller, you did a lot right. I think your second line center is still a very glaring issue because, hey man, I love Jesperi Kotkaniemi as a person, as a player. The dream of Jesperi Kotkaniemi, second line center, might be dead. Your options outside of that are Mark Jankowski and 37, 38-year-old Jordan Staal, which respect that he's maintained as well as he has, but he is basically all defense, very little offense at this point in his career. So that also wouldn't work. So I think that's a big issue. And goaltending will forever be a thing of, can Freddie Anderson stay healthy? When he's healthy, he's looked good. And then Pyotr Kochetkov has had one of the more interesting goalie developments I've seen in my time looking at prospects, just because I don't know what's really going on there, but he's not bad. But I think people were thinking that he would become a franchise guy, and I don't see that happening now. But I think they've done enough to get them a lot more competitive with Florida. I think they could beat them if they have everybody healthy and development goes with guys like Stankoven, Blake, Nikishin. If all that goes well, I think this is a team that definitely could step up to Florida and give them a real challenge and potentially beat them. Yeah, that's what I'd say. I don't really know if I'd go farther, but I'd say that for sure.
You talked about Kochetkov there. Like, what's your confidence in the goaltending? I know they have some money available. Is that maybe more of a target for them than, say, the centerman, or what would you like to be addressed more so?
Center, 100% center.
So
Center
you're
by
okay, center, but so you're okay with the goaltending. You just think it could be better.
Yeah, I think Freddie and Kochetkov is a good tandem. I think it can get better. Tulsky's been very adamant saying, "Hey, until we have the best, 23 players in the league, we're not done." So obviously he thinks they don't have the 23 best players in the league, which, I think goaltending could get better, but again, you cannot it's hard to sell fans on Jesperi Kotkaniemi's second line center for the third or fourth year in a row where he'll be on the fourth line within 3 weeks. So that'd be my thing.
The thing with their goalies is I feel like Carolina's in a similar position to 26 teams. There's 6 or 7 really true high-end elite goalies that you can kind of count on for 55, 60 games, and you can count on them in the playoffs aside from something going wrong, or you being Connor Hellebuck in the playoffs. That doesn't go well either. But aside from that, Freddie Anderson is in that next group. But like you said, his biggest thing is he available to play that night? And Chetkov is a guy that he's shown flashes in the pan of some pretty high end skill, but then there's nights where you're wondering if he's ever played the sport before. So I feel like they're kind of in that middling ground goaltending wise, but second line center is certainly the most glaring hole, I think, on that roster. That it doesn't take a rocket surgeon to take a look at that roster and see that that's kind of where they might be lacking a little bit. But you never know. Kotkaniemi could come back to his draft day hype somehow, but I don't know. I think
drafted ahead of Brady. Drafted ahead of Brady.
Drafted it. The man drafted ahead of Brady.
The team that has him now didn't do it, so that's all that matters to me. Well, not my team.
No, and that's the nice thing when he's on Carolina. He doesn't have the pressure of being a top pick. He only has the pressure of being an absolutely pretty much free asset that they got, right? So I got one more question for you, and then I'll leave it to Boyce to kind of close things off. Where do you see, and this is the big one, where do you see this team finishing this year? Are they going to win the division regular season? Do you even care about the regular season? And what round are we going to see them make it to the playoffs this year?
I'm trying to think, like, the Devils should be better. Maybe, I don't know. The Devils are a confusing team. The Rangers, I have no confidence in New York. Good job on Mike Sullivan, but other than that, your core is aging. You did nothing really to get better besides, you brought in Scott Morrow in a trade. That's cool. You didn't really do a lot. You're banking on your younger guys like Perreault and stuff like that to kind of carry you. So I don't think the Rangers, I think they'll make the playoffs maybe, but I don't think they're going to be that great. Islanders, no. I'm trying to think, like, their only main competition in that division would be Washington for the title. And I don't see Washington recreating the success. So I think the Canes definitely have a good shot to win that division this year. And realistically, no, I don't care about the regular season that much. At this point, it's just get to the playoffs and figure it out from there. I see them going. I can see them going back to the conference finals. I can see them going 7 games in the conference finals, and it could be a win, could be a loss. But I definitely think it's a team that, again, if everything goes right, they can get to the final. It's just everything needs to go right. So I think conference final would be my expectation if I was a Canes fan. And if they don't get there, then I would consider it a failure. But I would try in conference final or nothing. But obviously, you want to go to the Stanley Cup final, or it's an awful season.
So I guess it's kind of want to go towards the general management team in that, as you guys took a swing at Rantanen, and I guess it kind of paid off. Like, I mean, I don't think you really. I mean, you still got a pretty good asset out of it, and it wasn't what you wanted, but I mean, you still ended up with a good asset. Do you think they'll take a swing at a guy again? Like, do you think that's something they would be willing to do this year?
Yeah, 100%. This, no disrespect to Don Waddell, but Don Waddell was the perfect, like, it could have happened. It could have happened with Matthew Tkachuk. Steven Stamkos was rumored before he re-signed for a while. He was in on everybody. And that's respect. You can, you still got to have conversations with these GMs. Eric Tulsky in his first year made a move for a franchise player. Obviously, it didn't work out. He still made the move and got it across the goal line. That is something that Don Waddell in his Carolina Hurricanes tenure can't really say. So it's one of those things where I think they are not afraid to go out and get, a top guy. It just kind of depends, because they really don't need a defenseman. They don't really need wingers. It's basically, if a top 6 center becomes available, Carolina would just, you're going to hear them with it. But I think you're going to still see Carolina be linked to a lot of the big targets, just because they don't have the same fear of that. They want to get better. So they're going to do what they need to do to get better.
That was kind of a second follow-up I was going to go to. They actually have 4 firsts the next 3 years. Like, do you think they're willing to outbid, if that top 6 center comes available? In your opinion, are they willing to outbid anybody if that situation comes up? Because, I mean, they have a boatload of prospects that teams would be interested in. Maybe not the highest high-level guys, but I mean, there's a lot of solid guys that teams would like.
Oh yeah, I think, again, I don't think they know where they are. Their core is not getting, somehow, well, technically their core did get younger this year, but like Sebastian Aho is not getting younger. And I guess he's technically the oldest. Oh, him and Slavin and Anderson, but their core is not getting younger. Like, they know what they need to do, and they've done a good job doing it around the edges and making their their other top 9 guys. They've done a great job in making them younger. They've done a good job in getting younger defensively, and they kind of moved the window back and kind of just opened the window a little bit more long term. But they still know that it's not gonna extend forever. I don't think they're afraid to go, we have to get this guy because he will make our team better now and for the future, and we have to win it. We need to win a Stanley Cup with this core. So I think if they need to overpay, and I think, and completely honestly, I think the Miller trade itself was a good indication that they're not really afraid to go spend the assets to get the guy that they want for now and for long term.
All right. So here's the last question I'm going to give you here. Over, under 11.5 playoff wins next year.
Oh, I'm gonna inject optimism into myself. I'm saying over.
Call your shot.
I'm saying over.
So as you heard it here first. The first person on the Puck Bunker to predict their team makes it to next year's Stanley Cup Finals. Well, I mean, to be fair, we haven't had anyone for Florida or Edmonton or Colorado or Tampa yet. However,
we have Vegas on.
That doesn't change the fact that you are now our Mark Messier. So I hope that feels good, because we heard it here first. It's a guarantee. Nick, thank you so much for taking the time. That's Nick Bass from Developing Hurricanes, not to be confused with 90s NSYNC heartthrob Lance Bass. Not to be confused. We got Nick Bass here. Thank you so much for joining us. Check them out, the Developing Hurricanes podcast. They're on Spotify. They're on Apple Music. They're on Twitter at Canes Prospects. Darren.
And if they want to know more about Russian scouting, go to Nick. He knows a lot about the KHL, the VHL, and the NHL.
That's me.
I will give him that. I will give him that. He's very, very on the ball. But again, like we said, as a Canes fan, as a Canes prospect expert, what choice do you have when more than half the picks come out of the evil empire? Nick, this has been great. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk Hurricanes with us. We love learning about new teams, and we look forward to seeing which Kremlin superstars you guys pick this year. Boyce, thanks as always. We'll talk to you guys soon.